I'd love to do a little something about what's going on with Medicaid cuts. Can we, what did I give you, Albert? I gave you the story on Medicaid. Play the guarantees that Trump has offered on protecting Medicare and Medicaid. I don't think that's the stuff in the gate. I sent you something from X, which is kind of a mashup of him talking about the fact that he won't touch Social Security, won't touch Medicare and Medicaid. But of course, that's exactly what is happening. And he's touching Medicare and Medicaid. And I do believe that he will touch Social Security. And here's how he'll touch Social Security, just to tip it so you can say, oh, I heard it there. I've mentioned this before, but I will just underscore it because it's going to happen. They're going to recharacterize what they're doing with Social Security. It is not a cut, but as a new kind of improvement to Social Security. That's what they're doing right now with government, right? It's improved. We're getting the fat, we're getting the inefficiencies out of government when, of course, they're not doing that at all. They're recklessly cutting, and they're actually cutting key critical positions across government. Go ahead, play the, this is a little bit of a mashup of what Trump has been saying.
Is this the YouTube or the X? Because the X one is about golf. The one that you sent me was a golf one.
Oh, that's golf. Oh, I didn't send you the other one?
No.
Oh, maybe it is YouTube then. Try YouTube then. Okay, sorry. I send Albert all of these videos, and I don't know what. Yeah, these are the Medicaid cuts. Anyway, all right. So this is where the budget sits, and these are the plans. Let's run this, and just know that one of the things that Trump has said repeatedly is that we're not going to touch these programs because he knows that these programs are vital. But more to the point, leave that aside. He knows that these are politically not viable to talk about when it comes to cutting government spending. Go ahead, Albert.
Judiciary and Homeland are both basically border-oriented spending, and then defense, which both parties to a considerable degree needs to have spent more on them. So roughly $300 billion more spending. But then they're talking about cutting a lot of spending. And so the Energy Commerce Committee is tasked with cutting $880 billion worth of spending. It's expected that could be heavily out of Medicaid, could represent about 10% of our Medicaid spending. And so they're very focused on spending on Medicaid. But there's another guy who's not so focused on Medicaid. Take a listen.
Look, Social Security won't be touched. Other than if there's fraud or something, we're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now, if there are illegal migrants in the system, we're going to get them out of the system and all of that fraud, but it's not going to be touched. We're going to love and cherish Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We're not going to do anything with that other than if we can find some abuse or waste, we'll do something, but the people won't be affected. It'll only be more effective and better.
So this wasn't a campaign promise. This is stuff he said since he's been president, contradicting what the House is doing. So it's going to be a very interesting process on Medicaid, which is obviously a very sensitive subject. And by the way, programs like Medicaid, like food stamps that he's talking about cutting as much as 20%, the House talking about cutting as much as 20% of, red states actually get a disproportionate amount of this money. So it's going to be interesting to see how Congress people hear what they hear in their districts and what they say. Student loans, another big target, could cut about 10% out of student loans. And then there's another $500 billion of unspecified spending. 62 of it would be what's called oversight. Those are federal pensions. So he's talking about cutting, they're talking about cutting $50 billion out of federal pensions. But when you add all this up, the administration, which says it's going to reduce the deficit, actually has a plan to increase the deficit by $2.8 trillion over the next 10 years. And so if you look here, this is the same chart we just looked at. You add in these new deficit increases, and you can see that instead of even dropping for a couple of years, it doesn't drop at all, and it just goes up further and further.
So thank you, Albert. That was perfect, and that's exactly in that video was the stuff I wanted you to see. So sorry about that. We exchanged a lot of videos, and so sometimes it's hard to keep track. But you can see that they are going to be making cuts, at least if these proposals go through, to programs that are benefiting a lot of their constituency. And I have to tell you something. I'm troubled by this because I think we are a wealthy nation and we should try to help those in need. And so that maybe that's a liberal thing. I don't know if you, I mean, again, I think the old labels don't really apply. Liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. Clearly, they're probably Republicans who go, I don't even recognize my party. But all of that said, I think it worth noting that these cuts to Medicaid will affect his constituency, the people who show up at his rallies. In large measure, they are people who have availed themselves of Medicaid services. So it's more than a little bit noteworthy that the shoe will pinch in those states that have supported Donald Trump. Now, the other bizarro world we live in is that it probably won't affect his support. I mean, it seems as though these people are ready to, cut off their leg for this guy. They don't care what happens with their own poverty, their own illness, their own family. They are so in the thrall of this man. It is a true cult that he might be able to get this stuff through. I mean, because the wealthy don't care about this at all. And I don't mean all wealthy people at all, but I'm talking about those who are represented by this policy. And so I think there are two noteworthy things. A, he said he wasn't going to touch it. And B, that now that he's going to cut it, and I think one way or another they're going to try to cut it, it will affect directly many of his supporters. The states with the highest SNAP participation rates as of November of 2022 are New Mexico, Louisiana, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Oregon, Illinois, Alabama, Massachusetts. Those are food stamps, right? SNAP.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and it goes on. Alabama, Massachusetts, Nevada, North Carolina, but you can see the
mostly red states.
Higher percentages are there in Oklahoma, West Virginia, Louisiana. Those are full-on Alabama red states.
Yep.
So, it's like damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead with Trump. But that's his situation on Medicare. Meantime, on the other side of Washington, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, he put that cocktail down long enough to tell us that the military will be getting cuts. Now, he's saying drastic cuts over the next 5 years. The exception, anybody? Border security. There is a new memo. It just came out this week. It calls for military leaders to provide a proposal for 8% in budget cuts each year for the next 5 years. The proposals for the massive cuts to the Pentagon's budget of approximately $850 billion due by the 24th of this month. And it was issued the day before Trump endorsed this budget plan, which includes, in addition to that Medicaid cut that we talked about, $100 billion increase in defense spending. So Hegseth is telling everybody at the Pentagon, I need 8% across the board cuts. Trump, who is all about waste, fraud, abuse, efficiency, that's what's represented, right? He's actually increasing the Pentagon budget by $100 billion. And as everyone knows, there is no waste, fraud, and abuse like the Pentagon waste, fraud, and abuse. It's insane. That place is a monument to grift. That's one of the things about Ukraine that's wild to me. Ukraine was a cash cow for so many of the defense contractors. So many American companies. 70% of the money that was earmarked for Ukraine, 70% of the Ukraine money went to defense contractors in this country. So from a pure business standpoint, you would have thought Trump would be on board with that. There's a lot more going on with Ukraine than money. I think Trump and Putin have an unholy alliance, and it is really clear that Trump is now singing from the Putin hymnal. But he's also just making up figures. So as long as we're talking about money, he says that $350 billion has been spent on Ukraine. That's BS. I think it's closer to 180. And look, you may have a problem with spending money there, but I just told you a lot of that money stays here. And a lot of the Pentagon budget, to get away from Ukraine and back to the Pentagon and the cuts, a lot of the Pentagon budget money never leaves the Beltway. It's all about the defense contractor lobby. If you look at even the Department of Defense and those who have run it, I mean, aside from Pete Hegseth, who was hired off of the Fox News Channel weekend host set, I mean, they asked him to come in from the couch and pass the makeup trailer long enough to then run the Pentagon. But if you actually look at the last Trump administration, I mean, the guy who was Department of Defense head, he was a defense contractor before that. I mean, the world of Washington is an incestuous world. And that might have, to people who are MAGA heads, been appealing to you. Like you liked that Trump was outside that. You know, the incestuous nature of Washington might have bothered you to the point that you felt, I want to bring in an outsider. But there is also a quality of complete disregard for how things are done in Washington that will come back and bite the American people. And that's the sad part. It's not enough to be an outsider. You have to know how to get things done, how to administrate, how to manage, and how to manage Washington. And you have to surround yourself with good people. He hasn't. He surrounded himself with the Pete Hegseths of the world, with people who will share his desire for revenge and grievance. And that's what's happening today with the Kash Patel confirmation. It looks as though Kash Patel will likely get through. Isn't that right, Kim? I think they're voting on that, or they're close to a vote today. And so you have, he is confirmed. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
so you have in the Trump cabinet now those who will say anything to get confirmed. I mean, this is the way. That's why these confirmation proceedings are on one level, kabuki theater, but on the other level, and I do want to make this point because I know everybody may say, or many may say, well, why do we even do them? They're just a waste of time. Because in those hearings, you do hear some specifics that you need to hear. You need to hear about Patel. You need to hear about Hegseth. You need to hear about various allegations. Even if the fix is in, which it is, you still need to hear about these things. But now you've got Patel and you've got Bondi, and I'd suggest, and we'll talk to David Katz about this in the next half hour, and next little after the top of the hour, the next hour. I'd suggest that there's some dark days ahead for the DOJ and for the FBI. And I don't know how the chips will fall, but I don't think they'll fall in any kind of positive way.
Did you see the story about Senate Democrats who crossed the aisle and ended up voting for some of Trump's nominees, now having regrets and saying, oh, wait a minute, we didn't realize. So they had asked these pointed questions and were blatantly lied to by some of these nominees. And then moments after the confirmation was done, days, the nominees turned around and did the exact opposite of what it was that they told the confirmation hearing, what they said at the confirmation hearing that they would do. I mean, saying one thing to get confirmed and 2 days later turning around and doing the exact thing you said you wouldn't do. Yeah. And so now there are apparently some of the Democrats who crossed the line to vote with the Republicans who are like, oh, now I have big regrets. I wish I wouldn't have trusted him or her. I wish I wouldn't have voted that way.
It's crazy, and I hate to be playing hardball party politics because, as I say, I think there are flaws with the Democrats. But if you're really going to play the party of the opposition, you have to oppose. I mean, look at what Newt Gingrich did. He's patient zero on the way in which Washington is completely divided. So when you talk about the partisanship, the hyper-partisanship of Washington, how nothing can get done because everybody's about Democrats and Republicans and they couldn't be farther apart, Newt Gingrich started all of that. He literally had a meeting to decide we're going to block everything that the Democrats want to get done. That's all we do. We're the obstructionist party of opposition. And the Democrats need to do the same thing. So the idea somehow that they cross the aisle to somehow support anything, I think doesn't speak to the opposition party if they want to be that. I mean, you know, I'm not the institutionalist that John Rothman is, who comes through here occasionally, or Joe Biden. One of the big issues I had with Joe Biden is he's such an institutionalist. You know, he just believes in the institutions of Washington. But these people don't. Look at what they did with Doge. I mean, this is how much they don't believe in institutions. They bring in some guy, Elon Musk. He is a major contractor, U.S. contractor with big interests, moneyed interests at the federal level. He brings him in with a handful of his SEAL Team 6 of techies bros, and they go into the Treasury Department, the IRS, USAID, and they start firing people. I mean, that's how, there's no institution in Washington that supports that, Joe Biden, and you institutional Democrats. Now, the institutions of the law are now being brought to bear on some of this, and we'll see how they hold up. But I'd suggest, and I want to ask David Katz and Kim, if I don't, please remind me.
Okay.
The ways in which to enforce the law, even if you get the legal judgments, the ways in which you enforce the law may be completely obviated by this crew. I mean, they don't pay attention to the, what are you going to do? Send U.S. Marshals to the White House and U.S. Marshals to get Elon Musk? I mean, the courts have a way of enforcing things. They have marshals. But these guys aren't going to, they're already talking about flipping the bird to whatever decisions come down. The U.S. District Court ruled on appeal that monies that were designated for foreign countries in USAID, those monies do need to be dispersed. That was a ruling by the federal district court on appeal. And what did Trump say? He said, I'm not going to do it. So now what? So this is what I want to talk to David Katz about when we get him on in the next hour. I'm just looking at these comments. You can comment live on YouTube now. And by the way, in delay, most people take the show in on delay. Please leave comments if you are moved to. I read all the comments, every single one of them. And I really appreciate, that's why I'm exhausted all the time, because there are a lot of comments to read sometimes. But I really appreciate not only the feedback, but oftentimes the insight that you guys have. Peter McLaren, some of the Dems fear getting kicked out, say they are siding with the GOP. They don't have hardcore Dems. They'll go with whomever will help them keep their job. Yes, and to be fair, that is politics. You know, you have to take care of your constituency. But I'll tell you what's happening on the GOP side is GOP members of Congress are afraid to push back. I mean, you can see that. And why are they afraid to push back? Anybody? They're afraid to push back because Trump is more popular than they are. That's their real issue. Trump is more popular in their district, oftentimes, than they are. So when that ceases to be the case, then I think you'll get more pushback. But otherwise, it's just pure politics. It really is. And it's depressing that it's just that. It's a sad day when I agree with Bannon and Pence. Oh, because they're... with Bannon and Pence. Bannon is anti-Musk. Is that what you mean?
Bannon is anti-Musk, and Pence came out, I think, yesterday or the day before, disagreeing with Trump's stance on Ukraine, saying, no, Ukraine did not start the war with Russia. That did not happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.